And we're here with Connor Ryan. Connor, what is up?
Evan, doing well. How you doing?
I'm doing great. We're doing this early for our normal recordings. Usually we try to do it midday or sometimes it has to be later, but we're doing this at bright and early, 9 a.m. 9.
Had to have a few cups of coffee, get ready for this, but I think I'm good. Day to day, maybe, but I'll fight through it.
Up
Don't
before the
worry.
birds. Up before the birds. It's funny. Trags, when I used to do Bruins Beat with him, I would be like, hey, what time works for you tomorrow? I'd be like, can you do 7? I'd be like, no.
Yeah.
Respectfully,
PM?
no. Yeah, you mean PM? Because there's nothing for him. An old guy, not really old guy, but you know what I mean. And that was during like COVID and stuff. So I was like, Trags, I'm not waking up before like 11 most days. So 7's when I usually go to bed. Playing Xbox all night. What else was there to do in COVID times?
Exactly.
Um, anyways, there is some Bruin stuff to catch up on, and catch up on this we will. We'll start with this. As more and more defensemen around the league get new contracts, Seth Jones has a new contract, which we've talked about at length. Kale McCarr, Miro Heiskanen, those are two comparables to the person we're going to talk about. Darnell Nurse just got a, what was it, 8 years, 9.25 million per.
I
Is that
believe
what it
so.
was? It was
Yeah.
that, and Seth Jones got the same term and money, if I'm not mistaken.
I want to say so, yes. I think definitely Seth Jones is 925.
Both bad contracts. That same area. Nonetheless, big, long contracts for number one defenseman, however you'd like to look at them. And it's funny because the Bruins have a number one defenseman coming up for a contract next offseason. Charlie McAvoy will be up for a new deal come next offseason. I feel like it was just yesterday we were talking about his last RFA deal and what that would cost and how much that would be. And at the time, I said you should pay him a lot for a long time, but it's going to look like a lot until he becomes really, really good, which he's already hit. And that maybe $6 million you gave him 3 years ago suddenly looks super cheap, but they didn't do that. They went the other route. They did a short term for 4.9 million per. But McAvoy, his next deal is up, and every time one of these defensemen gets a deal, we all tweet the same thing. This market for McAvoy is getting larger and larger. Is there any hope? Well, what do you think he's worth, and what do you think he'll get? We'll start with
Well,
that.
what he's worth, I think you compare him to a lot of these guys that have signed contracts. I think he's worth more than most of those guys. So if you're a McAvoy and his agents, you have to look and say, well, look at what he's done. Look at, especially going to next year, barring something wild happening, he's most likely going to probably finish top 3 in the Norris. Hopefully, maybe at the very least, he's going to be top 5 again, right? And a lot of these guys that are getting paid, these crazy contracts haven't finished top 5 in Norris voting, right? It's more or less just,
That's true.
yeah. So, I mean, that's literally the most baseline way to evaluate just how he stacks up against other players. But I think you look at what his contract would be, and if you're weighing it against other players, what, at least 10 in terms of what he could get, what he should get. Now, what's he going to get with the Bruins? That's a different question entirely, right? Because we've seen multiple times where we map out what a guy is worth, what he deserves on the market, and then in terms of what he actually signs when, both the Bruins and a player have to cross the T's and dot the I's, they kind of more or less always seem to take less than or below market value for the greater, purpose of, keeping the whole team together and fielding a competitive roster. And, so, but what is that even going to be, right? So I don't think you're going to see, the mythical David Krejci kind of threshold of like 7.25 and no one can go above that. Well, he's over in the Czech Republic now. So, but still, are you going to see 10 million a year for one player, or are you going to see 8.5 over just a long-term deal? That's going to be the biggest question mark, because let's get it out of the way. Guy's going to make bank, and he deserves every bit of it. So it's all going to come down to just, what the Bruins can, work out in terms of a long-term deal that's going to keep him in the fold for a while, and just how much of a cap hit that's going to be. Because, even if you sign him, let's say you get him for 8 years, 8.5 million. I think if you're the Bruins, you have to be doing backflips, because 1, he's worth it. 2, the salary cap upper limit's going to be going up every year. So, in 5 years' time, that 8 million, 8.5 million is going to look even better and better as this guy continues to be top pairing legit franchise defenseman. So, yeah, I think it's all going to come down to what the Bruins can kind of, bridge the gap and work out something with him. Because if he was just a free agent and is going to hit the market, I mean, you could see 10 and a half, 11, maybe. If especially it all is going to kind of depend on what this next year is going to be, which I don't know about you, Evan, but sure seems like it's a scenario where he's going to continue to get better and better. Like when have we hit when have we reached the ceiling with McAvoy? Every year it seems like he's getting better and better. So
yeah, I this is why I don't see him hitting the market. I see this getting done midway through next year, because I don't think they want him to hit the open market. Because again, there will be teams who are lining up to offer him 10 and a half for his services. I mean, elite two-way defensemen don't just show up on the open market every year. They're not just there for the taking. And I mean, you look at just the top 5 in the Norris last year. Fox, young guy, is going to get a huge deal whenever he's up. Makar just got a huge deal. Hedman paid top dollar. Dougie Hamilton just signed a huge long-term deal. And then you have McAvoy. So I don't think there's any doubt that McAvoy is getting a lot of money. But I do think, for the Bruins' sake, one of Sweeney's biggest strengths is re-signing his own guys and getting them to sign for maybe less than they would get elsewhere. And I think you might see, you're probably going to see this in this scenario. I don't think this is going to be a Krug situation. That's for sure. I think McAvoy's kind of the guy they're going to be building around. I think he comes in around 8.5. I think it's going to be somewhere in that vicinity. I think they're going to say, as much as you're worth to this team, you're hurting us if you're making over 10. That's it. And I think that's true. I think it's true of any player. I think whenever there's a player who makes an exorbitant amount, is a 7th of your salary cap, you have an issue. You have a real issue. And the Bruins have been really lucky these past 15 years that that's really never happened, that guys were not making exorbitant amounts of money. So I think McAvoy's going to come in around 8.5, maybe 9. I have a tough time seeing that. Maybe they'll wait to sign this deal until midway through next year when they have maybe a better idea what the salary cap will look like for the 2022-2023 season. That might be more their goal. If it goes up $10 million, maybe they say, hey, we can pay a little bit more, just given what the potential for the cap will be. But it feels like if it was signed today, it would be around 8.5. And he's worth every freaking penny of that. I mean, that is not even disputable of how much he's worth. So moving on to other people, right shot players that could get paid. John Sweeney made some interesting comments in his media availability at the end of last week. It was right after development camp. We get to talk to Cassidy and then Sweeney in consecutive days. And this David Krejci stuff isn't going away. It's not going away anytime soon, people. Sweeney mentioned, he said, quote, we addressed some areas we wanted to, ultimately with David making a decision, meaning basically they knew prior to the free agency that Krejci was gone. They didn't find out on Twitter via the Bruins social media team.
They weren't
what?
They weren't flurried. They weren't like a Marc-Andre Fleury scenario where they like had signed. It was like that the meme that they use way too much now from Star Wars with Natalie Portman, where it's like the Bruins like, so yeah, we signed Foligno. This guy's like, you're going to sign tomorrow, right? You're going to sign tomorrow, right? Like that's what people think it was. No, I think they had a pretty clear indication going into free agency what the situation was. So
well, people are saying that's why Jack Eichel got a Twitter, was because now he can see where he got traded. He can see it immediately rather than hearing about it that someone tweeted. He can see the tweet. He's got to turn notifications on for like Darren Drager and Elliot Friedman, and boom, he knows where he's going. So credit to him for that. By the way, credit to the reporter who tweeted out like, this isn't Jack Eichel. and then Eichel quoted him, was like, oh, that's actually, per sources, that is actually me. So
it is me, Jack.
It is me, Jack. I can't wait to see someone will tweet that he liked a tweet saying that.
Oh, of course.
That like, oh, Jack, come to Boston. Like, I remember this is a long time ago. I think I sent this to you. We did a Bruins beat during the off season before last season, I think. And I tweeted out from the Bruins CLNS Twitter account about like, it was a show all about Krug's future and what the deal with that was or whatever. And I saw Krug like the tweet, because I think it was tweeted like Krug probably done in Boston or something. And he liked it. And I was like, damn. Then I went to look at it again and he unliked it. So he just liked and unliked. And I was like, damn. he probably realized last second, I can't be liking that stuff. So
yeah,
that was back in the day. He was back in Boston, I guess, for the Zach Brown band concert. So a lot of players filtering in. Jack Eichel was there as well on Sunday night. So yeah, he's got to be coming to the Bruins now.
Jack Eichel to the Blues.
He saw Zach Brown. I'm saying Eichel saw Zach Brown band in Boston. He's gonna be staying here. I mean, he's not going anywhere. Come on now. Anyways, Sweeney continued saying, "We're wondering whether or not he may return at some point in time. That's open-ended." So now the Czech season ends in March. Like, this is not just like speculation. The season ends in March. Could easily come back after a full season in the Czech and work his way back with the Bruins. What are the chances this happens?
I find it kind of slim for this upcoming year, just because I think there's so many hurdles along the way that you have to pass through to get him back here. Because it's not as, cut and dry as, David Krejci faxing like the Michael Jordan letter, like I'm back, and showing up like wearing a 4-5 jersey, like Jordan did in 95. Because, I mean, you look at it, one, the timing works out in terms of like Krejci could legitimately finish his entire season and come aboard right in time for the playoff push. But I believe you have to sign guys before the trade deadline. So I'm not sure when exactly the deadline is this upcoming season, but if, let's say it's in, usually it's like late February. So if you're, if he's season's over and then signs with the Bruins, he's not playoff eligible. So that's kind of what you're signing him for, right? For the help down the final stretch of the season. So it would be a scenario where if he did come back, he would have to sign at the very least by late February, which means, for as much as he says this is important to him and, going back to the Czech Republic with his family and playing, for a team that he has some ties with, to then just be like, all right, guys, peace. Like right before their playoffs seems a bit unlikely. So, and then the other hurdle that even if he did do that, he'd have to pass through waivers. So
he's like, all right, kids, you've talked to your grandparents. We're going back to Boston.
Yeah. So like that's, just the biggest hurdle is, like you'd have to pack up and leave more or less before your season overseas is done. And then you got to go through the waiver process, which he could go into it with the same kind of mentality that I think was Jason Spezza had, where it's like, if you draft me or if you claim me on waivers, I'm just going to retire, which maybe will deter some teams. But let's say, another cup contender is ahead of Boston on the waiver wire. It's like, you're going to retire? Good. We'll do it anyway. We're just going to put the screws to Boston. What do we have to lose? Like, what if it's like Tampa or something like that, and they don't need a center, but they're like, all right, we'll claim you. You're going to retire? Okay, well, we've claimed you, so enjoy your retirement.
Yeah.
Like,
peace, buddy.
Yeah, like, honestly, if you're a team doing that and you can stop another contender, another team that's, let's say it's in your division, from getting a legit top 6 center back in the fold for the playoffs, all you have to do is claim them and get some bad press. I think they're fine with that. Ask Tampa if they give a shit about all the bad optics about their cap shenanigans. I don't think they really care.
You know what means more than that?
Yeah, the Stanley Cup
ring.
Yeah,
Stanley Cup ring means a little bit more.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think it's that likely. It's fun to think about. People can kind of chill. I mean, maybe he signs here and then comes after the season ends. I don't know if that's even a thing you can do. I don't know how that, like, you could do it, but maybe next season, maybe the season. I mean, well, after this, the season after this, so the next season, maybe that's when he comes back. But again, he's a full year older, so you're not exactly getting, fresh David Krejci. But again, I don't know. I feel as much as fun an idea that is, that's his home. Like, I don't know. I have a tough time believing he's just gonna go home for a year and then be like, all right, we're going back to Boston.
Yeah, like
just bringing his family all parts of the world. I don't know. I think, to me, as fun an idea as that is, and I guarantee you they both said, hey, maybe, down the road, whatever, when you end something and you say, like, when you say goodbye to someone, you're like, oh, I'll see you soon. I'll see you around. And, like, you're never going to see him. I just went through that with college. Like, there were people you saw and you're like, I'm probably never seeing you again.
Exactly.
But it's funny. I was looking at, obviously that, the Bruins free agent signings are now 2 weeks old. That happened like 2 weeks ago.
Yep.
And as the time's gone on, you think about it a bit more. At the time it was, they signed depth guys, but nobody to really replace Krejci. They'll move Coyle up, as Cassidy mentioned last week, and kind of hope for the best there. But I'm looking at the free agent class of next offseason. And is there any chance that Sweeney said, you know what, instead of gearing up, signing us or trading for a second line center now, which there's no second line center really on the market, whether that be, there was no one that could replace Krejci in free agency, and via trade is tough, especially when you're a contending team. There was nobody that jumped off the page. Dvorak was not, or is not really the true answer there. Maybe down the line, but not at the moment. You think he said, let's focus on maybe depth pieces would normally sign at a trade deadline, Foligno, Hala, Nosek. And then at the trade deadline of next year, we'll focus on guys that could be up for trades. I mean, I'm looking at the free agent class of next season. Now, granted, a lot of these guys are making a lot of money and they're on pretty good teams. But I mean, just to give some names, and not to say the Bruins would be in on any of these people, but Malkin, Subban, Giroux, Kessel, Letang, Joe Pavelski, Ryan Kessler's actually up next offseason, if that matters at all. Barkov's up next offseason. Philip Forsberg is one that's up next offseason. And again, the Nashville's a team that's kind of teetering on whether or not to rebuild or kind of reload. There's centers out there. Now, does a team like Nashville make Forsberg available at the deadline? And that's how the Bruins get their second line center. They go out and get Philip Forsberg. I don't know. I think it's an interesting thing to think about, that maybe Sweeney kind of did it backwards, whereas most teams try to gear up in the offseason and then kind of get those depth pieces at the deadline. And this year he said, why don't we just wait and see what kind of second line centers we can get at the deadline, next offseason, et cetera. You think that's any possibility that happens?
Yeah, I think it definitely could happen, especially if they go. It's better to, maybe see what your internal candidates are, see how they do. And if you get to the point where you realize nothing's working, then you can at least still have time to address the deadline. Granted, that also kind of hurts your leverage, because the team knows that you are hopefully a cup contender and you desperately need a second line center. They're going to get you over the coals about it, because they know you're very desperate for it. But as you said, there should be a lot of guys available. Even a guy, I think Thomas Hertl in San Jose is going to be a free agent after next year, I want to say. So he's a guy that could be a legitimate, 70-point guy in the right situation. So he's a guy that maybe you view more than a Dvorak, which again, as much as the Bruins get tied to Dvorak, he's still a guy that I don't know if he exactly moves the needle in the direction that you're looking for, you need. Like, I feel like he's maybe still a 3C, maybe like an okay 2C. It's kind of like another Coyle. And you need you don't have a Krejci, but you need like a Hertl or someone like that who can legit be
to get you over the hurdle.
Okay, I don't want him anymore now, but
that's it.
But like those are the guys you have to target. So we'll see kind of how the deadline maps out, because I'd imagine the Bruins would be very interested around there. Like, even if David Krejci came back, I still think you had to go into this season expecting them to kick the tires on another defenseman at the deadline of, if Nashville decides to move Ekholm again, if Hampus Lindholm from the Ducks is available. Like, I would imagine they would be right in on any, potential top pairing guy out there. Now you've got kind of two big holes, right? Of like, well, we could use another top pairing guy, but oh crap, we still don't have a 2C. So I don't think you can acquire both in the same deadline unless you're willing to mortgage the farm. So we'll see what they end up doing, but I would not be surprised if you see them really, kicking the tires on a lot of, top 6 centers that are going to be hitting the market. And are interested in acquiring them before this season wraps up. It's just going to be as always, what's going to be the cost and how much leverage do they have? Because I think that's the only one risk you have with this, of, being involved in a deal for a team like Hertl, is that, the team's well aware of what your situation is. And it's not like you can usually just walk away. If you're in a win now window and you've got that huge vacancy on your second line, it's going to be tougher to walk away even when a team has a pretty heavy demand for you.
Yeah, but I just don't think – I think there's a chance they built the team backwards in a sense, whereas normally pick those depth guys up at the deadline, and instead they did it backwards, which if it works, it works. Like, if the market is better for centers at the deadline next year, next offseason, maybe that's the right route to go. I think that's an interesting way to think about it. The other thing you mentioned was Hampus Lindholm. Jay Fresh on Twitter had a good tweet like a week ago. Said, do you ever think about how crazy it is that the Ducks have finished 24th, 27th, and 30th in the past 3 seasons, and yet they still have Ricard Raquel, Josh Manson, Hampus Lindholm, Jakob Silverberg, and Cam Fowler all on the roster?
Wild. Yeah,
I mean, that's insane. Like, that team should be selling those pieces off tomorrow. They should be having a yard sale in front of the Honda Center to get rid of those guys.
Getting ready for that Jack Eichel trade.
Oh yeah, they all 5 of them are going to go to Buffalo. Anyways, that is Bruins beat for the week. That is every Bruins piece of information that you need to know. Connor, before you go, is there anything that you would like to plug?
Yeah, we're going to be, breaking down a few more potential moves going forward, whether the Bruins are really all done at this point of the off season. Weighing how much Charlie McAvoy could make next year. All those kind of still lingering questions that we can still explore before training camp gets underway and we get a better picture of what we're looking at with this Bruins team in 2021-22. So follow over at bostonsportsjournal.com. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, you can do that at ConorRyan_93.
Go do all that. For CLNS Media, I'm Evan Marinofsky. You Bruins Beat listeners, have a great rest of your week.